This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, nonstop Leafs talk starts now.
And off we go. What's going on, everybody? Presented by Botano. It's a Thursday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga with you. Jay Rosehill will drop by for another installment of 3 Hits with Rosey in about 5 minutes from now. Rest assured, he has a lot to say. First and foremost, our apologies for the technical difficulties yesterday, but we are trying out a new program, a new software going forward, so there shouldn't be any more technical glitches. If you missed it yesterday, by the way, we spent the first 5 minutes teeing up a Joseph Woll interview that we never brought you, at least on this show. Having said that, we did interview Joseph Woll. It is on our YouTube page at the Leafs Nation 401 where you could check it out. It was phenomenal stuff. He's so calm, cool, and collected. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of our interview with Matthew Nyes from a couple months back. Just so chill. We talked about that. We talked about a lot of different things dating back to this past season for Joseph Woll. So make sure you go check that out in our interviews folder at the Leafs Nation 401. Again, our apologies for everything that transpired yesterday. We aim to please and we aim to be better moving forward here on Leafs Morning Take. Should mention as well, have another great guest lined up for you on today's show coming up in about 10. Retired NHL netminder. Now does great work with MSG-TSN-RDS. Martin Biron will drop by in about 10. We're going to handicap Toronto's crease. I thought it'd make perfect sense having Joseph Woll on yesterday to talk on the three goaltenders right now in between the pipes for the Maple Leafs. And I say right now because a lot can change, of course, over the next couple months. So we'll dive into that with Marty Biron coming up. Also, remind you again to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Again, at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. If you're watching right now and are not subscribed, please help us out. Additionally, we're available wherever you find your podcast. Just search Leafs Morning Take and surely we'll pop up. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. It's sure to be a hectic 6 weeks here in Leafs Nation, so make sure you're posted to that website and to this show because we'll have everything covered for you, including the chat here on YouTube. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, you can drop us a line in the chat down below here on YouTube. We'll get to them a bit later on the show. But for now, let's get over the boards. Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final coming up tonight from Sunrise. Who would have projected and predicted it would go this way, considering the run the Florida Panthers are on? But as I said on the show the other day, the old rest versus rust debate. And then you add in the fact that there's an extra day off between game 2 in Vegas on Monday and now game 3 here in Sunrise on Thursday night. And quite honestly, I just have no way of knowing what's going to happen in this series. My Botano wrap-up is coming up in about 15 or so stay tuned for that. But it is Vegas against Florida. It's hard to believe the Golden Knights are 2 wins away from winning a Stanley Cup, especially when you consider the team we cover on a daily basis, how hard it's been to even just win a round. And Vegas just keeps going back and back and back to a conference final, back to their second Stanley Cup final. And oh, so close. But we'll see what the Florida Panthers have in store. To me, ultimately, the goaltending is my fascination, which is perfect for today's show, of course, with Marty Biron coming up in about 5 minutes from now. Adin Hill standing on his head. And I wonder, it is a copycat league, and everybody talks about the Matthew Tkachuk deal. What this means for net mining moving forward in the Stanley Cup playoffs, in the NHL in general. When you look at third stringer Adin Hill, 2 wins away from winning a Stanley Cup, and say he does it, what do teams do with their goaltenders? Are they electing to pay guys big-time money when you see a guy like Adin Hill step up? You know, I was sort of laughing the other night when it was Adin Hill and Alex Lyon who took over for Sergei Bobrovsky. We know how much money he makes, but you start to really wonder about goaltending in general in the NHL and if teams are overpaying for these guys, and maybe it makes more sense cap-wise to go with lower budget type guys, especially when you look at some of the cup winners over the years. And I know Jordan Binnington was out of this world. Braden Holtby as well for the Washington Capitals. Then you had Vasilevsky back-to-back for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then you had a very pedestrian Darcy Kemper. At least those are my words from last year when it comes to Colorado. That offense was such a juggernaut. It didn't really matter, in my opinion, who was playing goal for that team. They were going to win the Stanley Cup. And I did think it was sort of a pedestrian effort. So I wonder if the mindset changes around this league, knowing Adin Hill is in between the pipes, and taking nothing away from Adin Hill or his family. I think he's going to get paid by somebody this offseason, but it's sort of buyer beware, considering more so where he was like a year ago. The trade just to add depth in between the pipes, you know, the whole Robin Leonard situation. Logan Thompson's the number one for the majority of the season. Laurent Brossoit starts the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then here we are entering game 3 of the Stanley Cup final, and it is Adin Hill. Ever since that round in round 2 against the Edmonton Oilers has been an unbelievable story, quite honestly. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's still involved in the Conn Smythe conversation. That's how good I think Adin Hill has been. Maybe the sample size is a bit small for our like and our taste, but again, Bobrovsky didn't start the first round. I do think it has had a monumental impact, it goes without saying, here on this run for the Vegas Golden Knights. So for me, that is the big story here of game 3, the goaltending. We know Sergei Bobrovsky is coming back, but he's looked ordinary. He's looked human. 7 goals in the first 2 games of this series. And maybe it just speaks to how impeccable he was in the first 3 rounds here, the Stanley Cup playoffs for the Florida Panthers. Meantime, for the first time in 4 years, the UFC is returning to Canada. Saturday, June 10th, Rogers Arena in Vancouver. UFC 289 bantamweight champion Amanda Nunes will put her title on the line against Irene Aldana. I can't believe the day is almost here, coming up on Saturday. In total, 6 Canadians have been added to the card, headlined by Burlington, Ontario's Mike Malott. He's taken on American Adam Fugit. Malott, who's a Dana White Contender Series signee, is widely considered the top rising fighter in Canada right now. This marks the 6th UFC event in Vancouver. Additionally, this is the first pay-per-view in Vancouver in 9 years. UFC 174 on June 14th, 2014. It has been a while, almost a decade. So certainly looking forward to Saturday, and also looking forward to this, 3 Hits with Rosey.
Hey, welcome back to 3 Hits with Rosey. You know, if you haven't seen the interview that we put out yesterday with Joseph Woll, go back and check it out on our page, our YouTube page. It's going to be all over the place, but very impressive interview. You know, I got to say that it reminds me a lot of the Matthew Knies interview that we had earlier this season. We've got him again this week, but there's a correlation between these kids coming up and just having their heads screwed on right, just having their affairs in order. You know, it's no surprise that these guys are coming into the NHL, coming into that spotlight and performing, because when you talk to them, they have their thoughts sorted out. They have their heads screwed on right. They're confident. They understand what's going on, and they just seem like they're ready for this kind of an opportunity. And when they go out onto the ice and get thrust into, you know, the spotlight, both Knies and Woll were thrown into the pressure cooker at crucial times in the season for the Toronto Maple Leafs, with all the media and all the hoopla, and both of them performed under pressure. And when you interview them, I can see why. And I want to talk about, you know, when you're a part of an NHL organization, you go around their facilities and you just laugh. There's hyperbaric chambers, there's $100,000 treadmills that you can zip yourself into, there's leg squeezing sleeves that squeeze the lactic acid. There's everything under the sun. No horses are spared. Millions of dollars spent on getting the most out of these players physically, because that's what sports is. But where I feel like they're kind of not up to snuff as much as they should be is on the mental side of the game. And Joseph Woll really talked about that. He said, after my first year pro, didn't go as well as I wanted, and I realized that I have to really, you know, put some time and some energy into, you know, getting my mental fortitude in, you know, an elite place. And that's what all the elite players have: mental strength, mental toughness. And he seems to have been working on it in the last 3 years. And lo and behold, look what position he's found himself in. So very impressive to see these younger kids come up. And I really believe there's going to be a pattern between players coming into this league, having success, who have spent time on their mental preparation. It's every bit as important as the physical side of the game. And I really think that, you know, the Maple Leafs are in good hands, maybe more than people even understand, having guys like Matthew Knies and Joseph Woll coming into the fray with everything they've done preparation-wise. It's nice to see that these kids are looking like they're very much ready to be in this league.
Gotta love it. The one and only Jay Rosehill, and I guess the cat's out of the bag. Yes, we're interviewing Matthew Knies coming up tomorrow, an interview you'll hear in its entirety coming up on Monday. So looking forward to that. And also, it was a lot of fun catching up with Joseph Woll, netminder, of course, for the Maple Leafs yesterday. And it's so funny that we didn't even synchronize what we were going to say, and the fact that it reminded him a lot of Matthew Knies is exactly what I said to start off this show. So a very, very bright future when it comes to Knies, and certainly Joseph Woll in between the pipes. as I bring in today's guest, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Martin Biron. What's going on, Marty? How are you, buddy?
I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
Fantastic, man. Great to see that face. It's been a while. I think the last I saw you was in Montreal last year at the draft, no?
At the draft, yeah. And I'm actually looking forward to go to Nashville this year at the draft. I am going to pace myself because when we got to Montreal last year, it was the Jazz Festival. We went out right away, had a late night. The next day, it was the first time all the media were back together, right? Like with the pandemic and everything, a lot of people hadn't seen each other. So I started hanging out with a bunch of my French buddies that are with TVA and RDS and all of that. And then the next day, no voice. I had to do 4 hours of Sabres programming and I could barely speak. So I'm going to pace myself this year.
It's funny you say that because that was the running joke. If you remember my time over at SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, and I won't mention names, but every time we go to an All-Star weekend or a draft, somebody, and again, I won't mention names, would lose their voice, and it seemed to happen frequently. And I'm with you. I just got word the other day I'm actually headed to Nashville for All-Star weekend.
Oh, nice.
Drafts and All-Stars, man, are just so much fun, especially when you bring in Music City. Like, I have no idea what to expect. I just know it's going to be a massive party. The NHL world's going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun for these kids getting drafted, right?
Yeah, oh no, it's definitely a lot of fun. I remember when it was here in Buffalo, that was the Austin Matthews draft, and there was a lot of buzz that year with obviously Matthews and the Leafs picking one. It's funny because the NHL playoffs, Game 3 is in Florida tonight. That's where Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel got their draft. So Eichel going back to where he was picked second overall. So they, you kind of remember drafts by their locations. It's like you don't remember the 16 draft, the 12 draft, whatever. You're like, oh, the draft in Buffalo, the draft in Florida. My draft was in Edmonton. The year before that was Hartford. Like, that's almost how you remember the drafts.
And you remember them by the big trades too. I remember the Pittsburgh one way back when they pulled off that Jordan Staal deal. But certainly looking forward to the draft. We still have a bit of the Stanley Cup final left. And I wanted to bring you on to handicap the goaltending. So I don't know if you caught that. We had Joseph Woll on the show yesterday. Very bright kid, an American kid, obviously had a very, very amazing finish to the season. Great AHL campaign that ends up being the #1 goaltender for the Leafs in an elimination game in the Stanley Cup playoffs. As things situate right now, Marty, in between the pipes, assuming they do something with Matt Murray, how would you feel of a tandem of Joseph Woll and Ilya Samsonov?
I would be comfortable. Listen, I think Ilya Samsonov was really good this year. He and Matt Murray had their moments, right? So, Murray is hurt. Samsonov takes it. Samsonov missed. Murray plays a little bit, but we can all agree that the right thing to do with the Leafs and Matt Murray is probably to buy him out and to move on. So that leaves you with Samsonov, who's an RFA, needs a new contract, and Joseph Woll. I think Joseph Woll has a ton of potential. He can play an athletic game. He's got size. He's got strong structure. And I almost feel that what we saw Woll at the NHL level, he was better than what I saw him at the AHL, even though he's really good at the AHL level. But there's, such a thing that when you go from the AHL to the NHL, the shots are better, the quality of passes are better, but there's not a lot of unexpected things. There's not a lot of mistakes that you may see at the AHL level, missed coverage and all. And sometimes, goalies at the AHL level, you don't see their full potential until they get a chance at the NHL level. And sometimes the other way around, like a guy at the AHL level can be a stud, maybe don't get anything done in the NHL. So it could be a change. But Joseph Woll, when he was with the Leafs, played in the regular season, played in the playoffs, he was really good. So then it becomes what is Samsonov going to get and what are you going to pay him? Is he a $5 million goalie? Is he a $4 million goalie? Are you comfortable with that? Would you rather go out and acquire maybe somebody else through free agency or trade? Because it's going to be a crazy summer, in my opinion, with the goalie carousel. So I would be comfortable with Samsonov and Woll, but you still have to sign Ilya Samsonov, which would make it a little bit more complicated.
And those are the two things that are eating away at this market, I think, in general, is how much is too much for Ilya Samsonov. And the other conversation I'm hearing a lot, which makes no sense to me, is Joseph Woll's so young. Why put him in when this team is ready to win a Stanley Cup? How many, examples in recent memory have we got of teams with younger netminders that have gone a far, far away? I just don't know how you mature somebody and move them along if you don't play them in key pressure cooker type situations.
Well, so young, he's 24, right? So, like, if he was 21 or 22, I understand that. Right? I think of a goalie that's making the rounds now in the rumor mill is Carter Hart. When Carter Hart came up to Philadelphia the first year, the Flyers wanted to be patient with Carter Hart. They wanted him to mature in the American League and to develop. They had to force him into Philadelphia because of all the injuries that they had with their netminders the first year, and he did really well. Now, looking back, you may think, well, okay, maybe he would have had a different development plan, but who knows, right? You deal with what you've got in front of you and you try to make it work. Joseph Woll is 24 years old. So to me, that's not, oh, he's still young and needs time in the American League. No, it's time to see what you can do in the NHL, because you're the backup for a year, maybe two. Now you're 26 years old. If you're that good and you're 26, it's number one. Like, you're thinking, I want to be a number one goaltender. I want to lead a team to the playoffs. So, yeah, I think 21, 22 is very young. 24 is time to move on to the NHL.
You mentioned the goaltending carousel, and I think very similar to last offseason, it just predicts to be wild and chaotic, and a couple names coming to the forefront. We'll start with Carter Hart. Would he make any sense at all if something doesn't work out with Samsonov, and assuming Joseph Woll is one of the two? Would you take a flyer? Would you go after a guy like Carter Hart?
I wouldn't. And listen, I think number one, the Flyers look to want a lot in return. So this is a goalie that's making just a shade under $4 million a year left with an RFA tag after that contract. So you do have a chance to extend or look at the longer term plan with Carter Hart. But he was really good coming into the league. Then he took a major dip and it got back better last year. Is this because of John Tortorella and the way that he plays, or he has a structure for his team to play in the defensive zone? A lot of block shots, a lot of covering the middle, a lot of shots from the outside. They're very standard, right? Their coverage is very standard. I played for Torts in New York.
Yeah.
Probably my best few years when I think of my performances, my save percentage, my goals against average. It was my last 3 years of my career. But at the same time, it was a much simpler game. So I think that Carter Hart benefited from that last year. But at the end of the day, I think he was a 907 save percentage. Like, it's not like he rocked a 925. So I wouldn't. The performances tell me no. The cost would tell me no. And also, look, there you got to do your homework, right? And see, okay, Carter Hart started really good, and then there was a big drop. Why was there a drop? He's very technical. He's very structured. Goalies now that are structured and technical like that have to be big. Connor Hellebuck is structured and technical. He's not athletic and acrobatic and exciting like Vasilevsky or Shesterkin or Jussi Saros, right? Frederick Anderson, you guys know him well in Toronto, but he's very big. He can play the standard structured game. Carter Hart is not very big, in my opinion, when compared to all the goalies around. So that could be a problem as well. So you got to do your homework. Why did the play drop? When did it happen? And what would it look like with your team? I wouldn't do it if I was the Leafs.
Bottom line, Marty, I think it has to be an upgrade, and that's where Connor Hellebuck enters the chat. 1 year away from UFA, that's a guy I would sniff around on. I think if you're the Maple Leafs and you want to upgrade and you want to get a Vezina caliber goaltender, that's your guy, but the price tag is going to be something to look at too, right?
The price tag is going to be expensive, not when it comes to cap number, because he's just a shade over $6 million, which I think the Leafs could make that work. And you would get a really good goalie for a year. Now, again, you'd have to find a suitor for Ilya Samsonov, but with the year that he had and the goalie market, the way that it's going to be this summer, I think you could make a transaction for Samsonov. You could probably send Samsonov to Winnipeg and something else and get Connor Hellebuck in return. I think that it probably would work that way. I think Connor Hellebuck is going to be high on people's list this summer. He's extremely good. He can play a lot of games. One of the goalie that has played the most games, most minutes, seen the most shots over the last recent years. So I think that you can know that durability and reliability is going to be good with Connor Hellebuck. So he's on the top of my list of guys that I could see on the trade market. Jussi Saros is also on the top of my list of guys that I could see on the trade market. if Barry Trotz and the Nashville Predators are like, you know what, we can move on, move up Askarov, who was in Milwaukee last year. He's a very, very high-end talent as a prospect, and Kevin Lankinen played well last year. So how do you balance that, seeing what you could get in return for UC Saros? Apparently there was some rumors last year, and maybe it's going to intensify again this summer. So those are the two trade targets at the top of my list.
Yeah, I think ideally Saros would be the guy everybody wants, but again, price tag's going to be massive. Having said that, we talked about the draft. How many times has a team hosting the draft want to do something big? We even saw it last year in Montreal, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. You see Montreal picking Slavkovsky last year. Yeah, the host team always looking to do something big, but usually it's adding a big piece.
Yeah.
UC Saros is so popular in Nashville that I think you do that like on June 30th. You don't do it on the 28th or the 29th. You wait after the draft, and then you pull the plug on that, because you may get booed when you get up to announce your pick in Nashville if you trade UC Saros.
It's just incredible. They had Rene, they have Saros, now Askarov coming. It's just been a goaltending factory.
Even before that, it's been Mike Dunham, Thomas Vokoun, even Chris Mason and Dan Ellis played really well. Like it has been a goalie gold mine for years in Nashville. I don't know if it's in the water. I know before that, I would kind of say Mitch Korn, right? Mitch Korn was the goalie guru with the Nashville Predators alongside Barry Trotz, right, for all these years. And he did a fantastic job. And then he went to Washington with Barry Trotz. And then he went to the Islanders with Barry Trotz. And you look at the track record. Everywhere they've been, everywhere Mitch Gordon's been, there's been good goaltenders. Oh, wait a second. Before that, he was in Buffalo with Dominik Hasek. Like that just, makes it happen.
It's pretty damn good. As a former goaltender in this league, I'd love to get your general philosophy, and has it changed when it comes to netminders? Like coming in, I talked about the fact that Aiden Hill, if we were to talk about this guy a year ago, it's like, holy shit, look where he is now, right? He's 2 wins away from winning a Stanley Cup. Has your philosophy changed in terms of how teams should handicap their crease, knowing what we've seen the last couple of years with guys like Holtby and Binnington? I know Vasilevsky's maybe the exception, even Darcy Kemper last year. Like, should teams go cheap in between the pipes?
No, teams should not go cheap. Look, paying a goalie $3 million, $4 million is not the 7, 8, 9, 10, but you could still get a lot of good performances from a $3, $4 million player or goaltender, as long as they play well. Like, you've got 100 goalies that played in the NHL this year. Really, technically, you got 64 goalies when you look at 2 goalies per team. If you have a goalie that's ranked 20th or worst, when you look at goal save above expectations and all of that and the advanced metrics, like it's tough to win. So I pulled the numbers, right? The last 5 Stanley Cup finals, okay, there was only 3 goaltenders that were outside of the top 20 when it comes to goal save above expectations. And those 3 goalies were Carey Price in 2021. Well, it's Carey Price. Like, I don't care if he's 50th in goal save above expectation that year. He can always turn it on in the playoffs. Tuukka Rask in 2019, same thing with Tuukka Rask, and Holtby in 18. But if we remember, Braden Holtby did not start the 18 playoffs. There's Philip Grubauer, and then Holtby took over. So those are the only 3 goalies in the last 5 years that were worse than 20th in goal save above expectation. Other than that, it's been Vasilevsky last year was 5th. Kemper was 7th. Vasilevsky was 4th the year before. 13th. Hudobin was 3rd. Binnington was 11th. Fleury was 11th. Like, they're all goalies that have performed. So usually when they're older and they've had the performances, they're getting paid. So that's why you pay goaltenders. And that's why usually the more established goaltenders are the one that gets the result.
Hey, Marty, you sold me. That was fantastic stuff right there. Thanks so much for bringing the heat today, buddy. Looking forward to seeing what transpires here for the next couple weeks, and I hope to run into you at Tootsie's maybe.
Any plays down Broadway, I will be probably not talking so I can save my voice, but I'll be drinking, which will be good.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you so much for this.
Thanks a lot.
The one and only Martin Biron, one of the best in the industry, folks. He's phenomenal, and that was great, man. Like, I threw some heat at him, and I just wanted to throw that question at him because, again, he's a former goaltender in this league, and to fire back the way he did, I was really, really impressed because I'm siding with Martin Biron. I know it's a league where it's like a copycat tradition, and You see a guy like Aiden Hill have success. All of a sudden, people are wondering, maybe you have a guy who makes $2 million and you win a Stanley Cup. I just don't think it works that way. And excellent stuff from MARTY and Biron. Meantime, the Botano wrap-up is presented by Botano.ca. The game starts now, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. So it's game 3 here of the Stanley Cup Final in Sunrise, FLA Live Arena, the Florida Panthers, the Vegas Golden Knights. It won't be a sweep. Plain and simple. I know people are not giving the Florida Panthers respect right now, but I'm going to go with the Florida Panthers money line in this game, minus 118. If you want to get cheeky with it, maybe extract some more value, take the Panthers in regulation. Again, famous last words, because it's been such a crazy and chaotic Stanley Cup playoffs in general, specifically here in the Stanley Cup Final. We're just so wildly unpredictable, and the Vegas Golden Knights look so strong in game 2. I expect a bounce back. I don't think the Florida Panthers are going to go quietly. And again, it could be famous last words, but they've just gone so far. They've been so impressive. I know the old rest versus rust debate, but I think the fact they got an extra day off to chill out, reset, retool, and get back into the swing of things here in the Stanley Cup Final. On top of that, they're on home ice. The Rats are going to be going crazy tonight. So I like the Florida Panthers to respond. I don't know if they're going to win this series, but I think they're going to win game 3 of this series moving forward here against the Vegas Golden Knights here in the Stanley Cup Final. So let's look at the chat right now. Looking at some of the comments and concerns. Mark Wall is a future number 1 for sure. So he's feeling him. Maxime Popov writes in Nyes with a heart. So yes, if you missed that, Jay Rosehill letting the cat out of the bag. The fact that we're going to see Matthew Nyes guest on this show one more time. We're going to interview him tomorrow. It's going to be played in its entirety coming up on Monday. So looking forward to that. Hellebuck is 30. He will start to slow down. Great goalie. Winnipeg wasted a good chance at a cup. That's from Donnie Does Dishes. Love the handle, by the way. PS17, Marty is good. At least he has an opinion to share. PS17, I couldn't agree more. Marty brings the heat. That's why he's all over MSG and TSN and RDS. And I appreciate sort of his take on the crease right now, especially as somebody who was a goalie in the league 15, 20 years ago. So looking forward to that. Gospel testimony. I would not be focusing on goaltending because their tandem is good. They need desperate help with compete level, grit, and size on D and toughness on the wings. That's another thing, a really, really good take. Gospel testimony. Love that handle. That's another really good take. And that was actually my next question from Martin Biron, but I ran out of time. Didn't want to keep him too long. Was more so surrounded around, should the Leafs target a top 4 defenseman? It's so easy and so novel to blame the goaltenders and say, hey, shit, they've been crap. But at the end of the day, I just wonder if the Leafs are good enough defensively, especially with an aging Mark Giordano. Who knows if Luke Schen's going to resign? He was a great story. Morgan Riley took a step back defensively last year. You lose Jake Muzzin. A lot more questions with that team. So I wonder if adding a top 4 defenseman could make the most sense in the world when it comes to the Maple Leafs. So thank you to everybody in the chat. Again, at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can subscribe on YouTube. You can find us wherever you find your podcast, Leafs Morning Take. Again, Jay Rosehill is going to be back in the mix coming up tomorrow. Once again, we're going to have Matthew Nyes next week, so stay tuned for that. If you want to go back on our YouTube page at the Leafs Nation 401, once again, we interviewed Joseph Wall yesterday. Luke Schenn was on the show a couple of days back. We had Brian Burke last week as well. So nothing but the hits here on the show, including our interview today with Martin Biron, which I'll have up there in about 30 minutes if you missed it here on the show. Could always go back on the show as well. But again, appreciate all the support. It's our first day with this new software. I think it went fantastic, less of a lag. Of course, those of you who were with us the last couple of days, a bit of a lag situation going on, but we seem to have rectified that. So pretty happy with that. So we'll move onward and upward. And of course, get set for Friday. We'll have a full recap here of game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. Jay Rosehill is going to be back in the mix. And we'll look forward to next week as we get closer and closer to the NHL draft and free agency. Many thanks to producer Aaron. Fantastic job transitioning over here to the new software. Everybody in the chat, you're all phenomenal. We love you. I'm Nick Alberga. Thanks so much for listening and watching. We'll talk tomorrow. Take care.